Hey YouTube faithful, Heavenly Prepper here. So I've had friends, acquaintances, strangers ask me questions in regards to my Christian faith. And one common question I get from time to time is what's the best resource for an individual to begin their journey if they're an atheist, agnostic, someone struggling to come to faith, someone just new in their Christian faith. What are the best resources that they can sit down and read and really gain a lot of knowledge in one sitting? And so I wanted to go through, and that's a very difficult question to answer with just one resource. And so what I've done is I've collected a series of books here, and I like to call these Tier 1 and Tier 2 sources. So my Tier 1 sources are the 4 best books that I feel if you were to read these, you'd have a really good picture and understanding. And they're all coming a little bit from a different angle. And so I'm going to show you one at a time. I'm going to list these here as well on the bottom of the video. But I just want to list these one at a time here and show you these books. So we'll start with the Tier 1s. And these are the best books. Of course, that's a little silver there. Move that out of the way. The first is called Jesus Among Other Gods: The Absolute Claims of the Christian Message by Ravi, Zacharias. And this is an excellent book. And what I particularly like about this book, and this is, like I said, one of my favorites, absolute favorites, is that Ravi comes from a position that not most American Christians or seekers come from, and that is the Eastern philosophy and religions. And so he can speak very well as far as how Jesus Christ contrasts with these other religions, especially of the Eastern New Age descent and origin. And that gives a very unique perspective from his authorship. So again, I highly recommend this book. One of my absolute favorites. The next Tier 1 is Lee Strobel. And this is a two-part, because this one here is called The Case for Faith. And the one that precedes it is called The Case for Christ. And I had 2 copies of The Case for Christ, but I gave away my last copy, which is what you all should be doing with good books that you read and you want to pass on to others. But The Case for Christ, Lee Strobel was an author, a reporter, if you will, in Chicago, and he was an atheist whose wife had come to faith. And he called BS and said, "This is a bunch of bunk. I'm going to debunk the Christian faith." And he went on a 2-year journey, and that was The Case for Christ. And after interviewing experts and trying to shoot them down and all the theories, he came to faith. And so he wrote a book about his 2-year journey and how that all came together. And like I said, he started that journey as an atheist and came to become a Christian afterwards. Well, his follow-up book right here is called The Case for Faith. And this book is for those who are on the verge of becoming a Christian, but they have a particular objection. Or the new believer, but he doesn't like something about the Christian faith. And so this book here outlines the top 8 objections to Christianity. I'll just read these real quick. The first objection: since evil and suffering exist, a loving God cannot. Number 2, since miracles contradict science, they cannot be true. Number 3, evolution explains life, so God is not needed. 4, God isn't worthy of worship if he kills innocent children. 5, it's offensive to claim Jesus is the only way to God. 6, a loving God would not torture people in hell. 7, church history is littered with oppression and violence. And 8, I still have doubts, so I can't be a Christian. So these are some of the biggest objections that you'll get on a daily basis, if you're in dialogue, of course, about the Christian faith. And he answers all of these quite well. And it's not just him answering, he's talking to experts, again, doing his reporter research analysis, etc. So those are the next 2 by Lee Strobel. The Case for Christ, number 1, and The Case for Faith is his second book. And the 4th Tier 1 book, and this is an oldie but a goodie, is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is probably one of the most famous authors for the Christian faith. You've no doubt heard of him. This book comes to you, and that CS stands for Clive Staples Lewis, and he was born 1898, died 1963. This book is very well written, and it basically tells you what Christianity is and what it is not from a biblical perspective, and what the Christian mindset is, what the Christian belief is in regards to all kinds of different things that we think about on a daily basis, and controversial issues, if you will. And he just lays it out real straightforward. It's a very compelling book, very good. Again, these 4 books, these tier 1 books I call them, if you would read all 4 of these, you would have a lot of your questions answered, very few questions outstanding, and those you did have, you could find the answers to, I'm sure. So those are our tier 1 set. Getting into our tier 2 books. So if you read all those, then welcome to the tier 2s. Here we go. First one's called Heaven is for Real by Todd Burpo. And this is a story of a child who, his dad's a preacher, but as he was, I want to say 4 years old, it's something very young, he has a near-death experience in the hospital from a stomach problem, and the book is a retelling of his journey to heaven, and it's really amazing. And you think, the innocence of children can really they'll just tell you what's on their mind, and this book does a great job of just breaking down the barriers for somebody's like, this is impossible. You read this book and you're like, wow, this just cannot be made up. Very, very difficult to just make this up. But again, it's more a heartstrings book. It's not for you logical types, but I recommend it anyway. Speaking of logical types, the next tier 2 book is called Christian Apologetics by Norman Geisler. This could be a college textbook. It's more dry, but it's a great philosophical and logical argument to why Christianity is the correct religion. And I don't only like to use the word religion, the correct worldview, why the Christian faith is the correct worldview. Very well written. It's a book that you're not going to just sit down and read it all in one setting. You're going to have to take it by pieces and maybe read it slower than your average book. Like I said, it's definitely college level at least. And if you want a logical step-by-step of why Christianity has the correct worldview from all the worldviews, he lays it out quite well. Not an easy read, though. This one is a much easier read. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler, again, with Frank Turek. And this one's, like I said, a much easier read than Norman Geisler's Christian Apologetics. But, it's also fairly thick. But this is another great laydown of why the Christian worldview is the correct worldview, and why atheism actually has more beliefs than Christianity, and they have to hold to these beliefs that are unproven truths, if you will. And again, couldn't recommend it enough. Very good read. And last but not least, we've got a short one for you, and this one's by Randy Alcorn, and it's called The Grace and Truth Paradox. And a lot of people think that you can't have both grace and truth at the same time, or grace and justice at the same time. But this book lays out quite well why you can, and why Jesus Christ was the one who did bring grace and truth. So again, pretty thin, short read. So these are my 4 Tier 1 and Tier 2 books. And like I said, Heavenly Prepper here, I want you guys prepping. I want you prepping for not only the potential economic collapse coming up, and with good preps like food, silver, water, medical supplies, but I want you to prepare your mind. Prepare your mind for what's beyond, and what is the next stage in your life after we inevitably all pass away. So those 8 resources should get you started. If you have so much time in your hands, you can read all that in a month. Just send me a note, and I will get you more resources to deal with. And this is Heavenly Prepper, preaching, prepping, signing off.